Good morning, Ashwin. Welcome to Caizin Commune podcast, Who Has a Clue, where we talk to people who indeed do have a clue, such as yourself. And the topic for today is estimations, served with a pinch of salt. Before I give the context to everyone out here on the podcast and my listeners, Ashwin, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi. So, firstly, thank you, Ameya, for inviting me. Um, I'll say a couple of things about myself. My name is Ashwin, and I have been a software developer for over 25 years now. So this is my 25th year in the business of writing software. And thank you. um, and in the last 10 odd years, I do freelance software consulting. Okay, primarily kind of in a role of you could call it an outsourced CTO.
Hmm.
So I bring in a CTO like perspective to we founders, generally they're startups, founders and small companies who are in like dire desperate need in of some good software consulting, uh, but can't really go on to hire expensive CTOs, full time, or many a times such kind of candidates don't really approach these companies.
Hmm.
And several of these projects really are just time box, so they don't really want to take on an employee for
Hmm.
longer than a year or so. And it suits me fine. I like to be my own, my own master that way. So I'm self-employed in the eyes of the government. I'm a self-employed person.
Nice,
So,
nice.
so thank you, and this is my introduction. So please.
That is brilliant. But yeah, Ashwin, right? So let me just tell my listeners what is this about. Okay, so estimations are still painful, and I think people cringe still when anyone demands kind of give me a number when this will be done or a date. I really want you to tell your listeners how you responded to my call to record this podcast.
Yeah, yes. So when I first heard of your topic, one line from my end that sort of sums it up is I throw in a number and then I start praying. Okay, so so that's after 25 years. Okay, I've tried perfecting this art of estimations. I do have a couple of opinions about it, but it's still
Right.
it's still quite wild out there.
Right, right. So yeah, I mean, I think the tone is kind of set for the podcast. Let me just inform everyone that I'm not undermining here the act of estimations. They're absolutely essential. They're not going away anywhere. But I think we're going to take a humorous take on this whole exercise of what estimations are, and just the whole day modern day jargons. Now there is something called as exactimations. We always started with ballpark estimations. A lot of adjectives have been given to estimations. Many mechanisms and frameworks already exist out there to help you improve how you do estimations. So just to my listeners, please don't get offended. We are just going to have fun on this podcast, just going to go through some of the humorous takes. And the best part is that if you guys relate to it, please drop in a few comments. I think it is funny because we can relate to it. That's the whole point of it all. And Ashwin, so yeah, let me just begin with our first clip out here. Um, okay, so this was an interesting clip here. One guy is kind of asking what is the ETA for this project that I just described to you, and the opposite person says 1 week. And then there is negotiation happening, saying, okay, let's do it in point 5 weeks. The opposite person says that I meant I will
That's
share the ETA in 1 week.
ETA up in one.
And 1 week. So that so this is exactly how my so the reason why I'm doing this podcast actually started with this exact same thing. We had this concept of zero sprint, etc., wherein we wanted to go through. Ideally, we wanted to go through some kind of a design orientation, architecture, and solutioning, wherein we set up our subsystems, we set up our infra, we set up our DevOps, and everything like that. Do a zero sprint so that we can kind of run with a good velocity thereon. Okay, it so happened that when we actually started to do things, we realized that we may not actually meet the targets. Okay, so we may not get done in time. So I had people giving me estimates for the exercise of the estimate. So it was even one level deep. So there was a clear release goal, which was obviously a very large one. People tried to break it down, saying ये भी करना पड़ेगा. This will also have to be done 1, 2, 3, 5 steps, and then इसको estimate करना पड़ेगा, इसको estimate करना पड़ेगा. ये estimate करने के लिए 3 दिन लगेंगे. So people started from there, and I was like, okay, something does not feel right, because I can understand that the whole point about finding out what unknowns are and kind of drilling it down and then getting a number. I can understand that bit. But okay, Ashwin, tell me something. Do you relate to this?
Yes, yes, yes. This is quite familiar. Firstly, I agree with what you're saying. Okay, that sometimes it comes as a shocker. This kind of thing would, if you're looking at the person on the left, you could say like the guy who's paying for it or the stakeholder here.
Right.
Okay. In my experience, they what they do is they have their own ideas about what kind of timeline this would be. Okay. Now
Correct.
call it like a mistake, or everybody does their own thing. Okay. Even if he's a non-technical guy, they walk into meeting already having a certain perception or a certain figure in mind. Okay.
Right.
So he is not even bothered to ask exactly what you're talking about when you say 1 week, but he concludes that this is possibly what I had. Maybe he's happy. Okay. Maybe he thought 2 weeks. Then the guy opposite to him says 1 week, and he's so happy, and he's trying to push it even further. Let's do it in half a week. Okay. So first thing I've learned is because of these things is that the perception of how much work is to be done, particularly with us folks, in software industry,
Correct.
is very dangerous. People who are not from software generally think there's a lot of time taken for tasks which are trivial to us,
Hmm.
and for something which looks extremely small to them. Okay, something that looks trivial to them might take us like a whole month to engineer. Okay, and they have no idea that it takes this long, kind of thing.
Right.
So I generally go into such meetings with an open mind. I've learned that education of the stakeholder as to what really takes time in this business, and what
Hmm.
really doesn't take time is part of that initial thing. But I maybe that zero sprint you were talking about, okay, maybe could also invest some time in educating the stakeholders, because see, the whole thing is you're trying to avoid a shock to the stakeholder. Okay,
Correct.
the estimate is going to be some number finally. Okay, all you're praying for is that the person opposite, sitting opposite, is going to smile, or maybe he's he's going to be neutral, or maybe he's going to frown and start screaming. You know there's going to be one of these three reactions, and you're rather
Right.
hoping it's a smile. But to get a smile, I think it takes if you invest a bit of time in educating how we do these estimates, and this is what I've done repeatedly now over years, that I don't actually do the estimates. I first educate the customer as to how we go about doing these things. So what happens is they develop a certain empathy for what you're doing. Okay.
Perfect.
Suddenly they're no more suddenly the stakeholders are no more the outsiders, or
Correct.
somebody who's like your enemy. And
Right.
then I kind of ease him into the process. I tell him what exactly takes a lot of time, what is trivial, honestly. Okay. Sometimes they
Right.
feel, if there are 50 HTML pages,
Hmm.
50 HTML pages. They ask me honestly, guys, will this take like 50 days? And you could as well, you could get away with that. Okay, saying yeah, 50 days, and use that time somewhere else. But no, I mean, you got to be honest. Okay, these are HTML. Understand, maybe a simple HTML pages don't take a couple of hours to make generally, and this whole task is about a couple of days. But then if they suddenly say, I want a small little AI sort of just put in a chatbot here in the corner, okay, here,
Right.
and have him give me smart answers. Okay, I'll ask him, what do you feel about next month's sales? What do you feel? so, so you got to explain, okay, yeah, it takes a couple of square inches down at the bottom, but do you realize you're asking for something that is perhaps a couple of months of engineering, if you want to put in a smartness or a AI like thing there. But what it
Right.
helps is to educate and empathize, and then plunge into that phase, the initial, the beginning of the estimation, so
Right.
that you know that the way you're doing is partly shared with that stakeholder back there. At least he knows
Right.
how you're going to do this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Let me tell you the other side of the story also, right? So I mean, you're talking about people who don't come from software, so they have to be educated. That's an excellent point. Actually, it never gathered to me that when they ask a question, you can actually tell them how the estimation is going to happen and what those numbers mean before actually showing them or disclosing them that figure entirely. That's an excellent point. Now, let me come to the other part of it. I think the stakeholders who are technical in nature, if it happens to be a tech
I was going to
customer,
come to that.
yeah, they actually
Yeah,
come
yeah.
with, okay, so we'll take that point up a little bit later. So we covered this something, the famous Dilbert comic strip. So today also, if you just do estimation and just do Google image search, this would probably be ranking the top out there, even if you don't search for comic strip. Okay, so Dilbert's boss says he wants a cost estimate on the project, and Dilbert actually is the first honest answer, saying, "I have no idea. I haven't given or even gathered the user requirements, so he doesn't have a clue." It's a very honest answer, which most likely every developer is going to give if you get asked like a random question. So the boss says, "Okay, don't worry, I won't hold you by the estimate." Dilbert,
That's a trap. That's a
yeah,
trap.
exactly. So Dilbert actually responds saying, "No, yes, you will hold me up. You will put it in the plan. Forget we had this conversation and fire me when I go over budget." Right. So this is where the apprehension is also setting in. Give me the number or I'll fire you right now. Okay, so it's kind of using his authority to get around that and kind of bulldozing him to give an estimate. But look how he answers. Okay, Dilbert says, "Okay, it'll cost $10 million." The boss, the boss, obviously the boss responds saying it's too high, and then he's saying, "If you already know the cost, why are you asking me?"
Why are
Right.
you
So
asking me? Exactly.
that's where the prejudice comes in, and most likely the boss already had a budget in his mind, and he just probably wanted a validation of sorts whether you'll be able to do this in that time or not. So boss says that I asked you because I wanted you to feel like you had an input, and he's like, in is input
Inputs
supposed to feel this
feel
bad?
this bad.
This is the reason why I love this comic strip, because I mean I don't want to kind of kill the joke here, but it just goes through all these emotions of a developer, right from apprehension, like he's like, I will be held up if I give a number. This whole fear of commitment steps in, right? So I mean, he's a developer is always like, if I have to give a number, what is going to happen with that number, right? I mean, will I be held accountable for it? Obviously I have to commit. If I tell them that this will be done by this particular date and I will need 3 or 4 people, that is going to cost you X hour dollars per hour, and that is the total cost budget estimate with some buffer of sorts. I think the fear of commitment kind of sets in, because do you think people get punished for wrong estimates?
I don't think they feel. Everybody feels the heat if
Hmm.
you're in any kind of unfriendly situation. Okay, this is just simple fact of life. Whether you're entering your little, when you're a little boy and you're entering your principal's cabin, or if you're a software developer entering the boss's cabin, particularly when you know the agenda. Okay, it's not that he's going to shout. I'm not of the opinion that all bosses are, horrible, and they would just shout and say. Not at all. In fact,
Right,
most people I have known are quite smart, and all they want to exert is what we call as a gentle pressure, okay? Just to keep things going smoothly. Okay? It's a gentle pressure. I never seen anybody actually shouting and screaming at any developer.
hmm,
But any human who comes to face with a situation that I said I would do this in 10 days, but I have to go back and say, I'm not even halfway there, guys. It will probably take 20, and perhaps I would still be wrong. So on the
right,
20th day, I may still come and say it's going to take another 5. This is not a friendly situation. Nobody likes this.
correct,
And that is why they are afraid to say 10 in the first place as well.
right,
It's not that so it's misunderstood. The joke's, of course, the joke that this shouting, screaming, or firing. I've never seen any of that. Personally, I've not really experienced or seen it that way. But nobody likes it. People feel that it will affect my, maybe my performance evaluations, or things like that.
Right.
Um,
But let's
and
so
hence the hence everything else. Yeah.
right. But let's talk about the prejudice part of it. So, do you think people come with a cost prejudice? So, you already touched this topic during the last slide. Do you think generally they come with a budget in mind? And then is it possible that we actually start with that? That if you have this budget, because they don't really want to disclose that upfront, right? Because obviously anybody can reverse engineer that budget and find out how much can be achieved in that budget. So, especially in software services business where the budget may be already fixed, they want to make sure that they get the best value for their dollar, right? So, in that context, if the budget is already fixed, do you think the whole estimation exercise should start with a negotiation?
I think my wishing is one part, but it never happens. Let me just jump to the answer, the end of the answer. I wish they would disclose to me if I'm sitting on the opposite end of the negotiation, of course. So I'm the
Hmm.
one who is delivering these estimates. I would rather
Hmm.
have them disclose very honestly what their idea is or what they have in mind as far as budget is concerned.
Hmm.
But it never happens, okay? Because I've tried it multiple times and people say, yeah, it's you tell me what you can do and then we can stretch and we'll change, but they never really let out the real, the real secret. Okay, so I've stopped doing it of late,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I realize it's because it's pointless trying to ask and even waste any time there. But again, I would say that if you I try to read the person rather than what he's saying or what the words coming out of his mouth in a sense. Try to
Hmm.
read the person because if you read him better and better, that way you kind of form an estimate of what's in his mind.
Correct.
Okay, so you try to guess what's driving him. Why is he come here? Okay, so
Right.
that kind of thing. Everybody does that, and I think it's yes, everybody is prejudiced. You tell me how many times a person like you and I would, the kind of purchases we do in our life. Okay, I will tell you once a while you will buy a new car. Maybe
Correct.
once, maybe twice in your life. Maybe if you're rich, thrice in your life you'll buy a house.
Correct.
Okay, like a big purchase. And tell me, don't you have something in mind when you go there? Do you really go and tell this guy,
Agreed.
I'm
Agreed.
looking for a
Right.
house. Just show me what you got. And he's wondering, show me what you got. I mean, I got something from 6 crores down to 20 lakhs. But then
Right.
you don't want to disclose what's in your mind, and that's
Right.
how exactly how everybody else plays it as well. Okay, so I think it's kind of a little pointless there. Better to jump on to what they want and try and come up with an honest estimate. Okay, so and as early as possible. So that initial thing is very good because if they have a big problem, right? So if you come up with an estimate of 3 months and like how this guy says, $6 million or something he said.
Yeah.
Okay,
10.
it's better come up early in the first meeting or the first
Right.
day or the second day that this guy says, no, 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 sorry, hang on. All I had is 500,000 actually. I'll be really honest. So now what happened is you stopped at least wasting another couple of weeks.
Correct.
Okay, you gave him ballpark kind of uh, in the zone up there. So at least eliminating any possibilities of a complete mismatch of alignment of thought in the sense. You might as well
Correct.
would stop there and do something else. So because he had something else in mind completely. He wants you to build a small little toy car. He's not really purchasing a car. He came to buy a toy car. Now, oh, okay, you want that car? Okay, one that is this big. Okay. So at least it takes care of misunderstandings. Anyway, but
Right.
please, please.
Yeah. So in the same progression, right? So we saw that Dilbert tried to be honest in the previous strip. Now the next comic strip is even more interesting. Now this lady comes up to him and says, "I need a budget estimate for my project, right? But I don't have a scope or a design for it yet." Now he just jumps directly and gives a figure. So okay, my estimate is 3.5 million, whatever. He just jumps directly at it. And she's like, "But you don't know anything about my project." And he responds saying, "That makes the two of us." So, so that is also, so I've realized that because we have gone through this progression. So my question is going to be a little tricky out here. And
Uh-huh.
Ashwin, so tell me, 25 years you already mentioned, does experience make it any easier?
Yes, it does. Okay. Firstly, yes, it does. But in ways that not many would think it is. It just makes. Like I said, I've learned that estimates are better if you read people. Okay.
Hmm.
And whether it's reading the client initially, and then going back and reading your own team correctly. Okay. And you just know when a guy says, so if you know your team, you know them well, and when somebody says I'll take 10 days, look, you are the customer in this case, and you know when he says 10 days, he's going to take 20 days. I know that because I know this
Right.
person.
Right.
And you get better and better at this, to the point that eventually I've learned to form these patterns so quickly, that because I keep jumping in and out of even customers so quickly, on the third day I don't even know their names properly, and I'm made to sit in a meeting where we are estimating something. And but I look at their faces, I get their backgrounds. Okay, I make sure I do that part of the homework first,
Hmm.
and that's what actually makes it better. There is always going to be unknowns. I only look for number of weird unknowns. Okay, I call it myself. We have a term for that somewhere, I think, where we try to isolate in any project what is the most unknown, or the what is the most weird thing here. That is the one that is going to kill make or break the project. Okay,
Hmm.
everything else we know is in control. So a couple of these things you learn to smell early. One guy came to me around 3 years back, and he was well funded. I knew that. Okay, and I knew that because of the way he was with his clothes and his shoes. Actually, I
Hmm.
knew he was he was good. I knew that this part of the budget is not a problem. He gave me one line
Right.
requirement. He said, I want a WhatsApp clone.
Okay.
Okay, I just want a clone
Interesting.
of WhatsApp. As simple as that. Okay. And now you can imagine, your mind, I think you immediately look that way. My point is,
Right.
you know how much engineering is back there. Okay,
Correct.
so it's an insane, absolutely insane amount of engineering. And um, well, he wanted it there, right there in the hotel, across the coffee. Tell me an estimate now. How do you do that? Yeah, I think you get my point. Okay, sir.
Yes, I get
So
it. I get it.
the
But
best
okay,
I could.
so yeah, you're right. So so underlining thought here is that also, which is there in this comic strip, the scope or just the design, or even let's say breaking it down. Um, I don't think you can never know if it's enough or not. I think you can just, it can actually be an endless exercise. But there is a point when you know that this is sufficient, that you have a starting point, and you know that when you start to do things. So my philosophy, or actually around this, or the way I practice around this, is pretty simple, that you actually bite what you can chew, which means that you plan for X amount of hours for which you have extreme clarity on, and run something like a dual track agile, where you're doing some discovery side by side along with the development as well. So as and when you kind of keep on accumulating work, so estimations may not come on day one, but maybe day 10 or day 15 or day 25, you will have a better picture of the same estimates. So I do believe an iterative process definitely counts, because when you have clarity on the scope and design, or what has to be done really, when little gets done, then you have a better picture on how much more is remaining and how much more can be achieved. Yeah. All right.
I agree. I agree.
I'll jump to the second one. So we were talking about experience, and again, so this happens to be Dilbert's colleague, right? So he is telling him that he gets wildly different estimates for how long it will take to write the software. So he's probably asking different people and different teams within the company, and he's getting very different estimates. Now Dilbert says, based on my experience, I say take the longest estimate and multiply it by 3.
Three.
Okay. That to multiply, there's no buffer, etc. So now here they're actually talking about is experience exactly the same as pessimism. And Dilbert responds saying experience is much worse. So this is it's a this clip actually is this strip is a masterpiece, okay, for many reasons. First of all, the first picture actually says that estimates are non-transferable. I mean, if a team A can get this done in certain amount of cost and time, it's not necessary that somebody else also will be able to do that in the same amount of time. Obviously, because everything counts, heuristics count. If you've done some work, something like that in the past, it counts. Your product knowledge, your domain knowledge counts. If you will be able to do that with lesser startup time, that will count. So there are several factors which come about giving a particular estimate. The second clip actually talks about that every estimate is bound to be wrong. Okay, so there is not going to be ever a right figure, and nobody knows how much that buffer is going to be. I think with experience, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think with experience, it is all about reducing that buffer. It's just all about that. I don't think you can ever get accurate per se, but I think with experience, you can only count on reducing that particular buffer and just getting it under control. The third square on the strip here is actually counting, saying that, do you mean that experience is pessimism? Because he actually took the longest estimate and multiplied it by 3. So yeah, I mean that is just plain humor out there. So
Yeah, that's
I
plain
think
humor. Yes.
if you've seen it enough, I believe there is that quote, right? I mean, with age, you tend to get unimpressed by a lot of things around you. So you just get very hard to impress because you've just seen it all and kind of been through all the permutations and combinations of scenarios around you. You kind of develop a hunch. But yeah, so talking of hunch and gut, do you think it is possible to tune the gut? And how do you do it?
Well, yeah, I think some part of your question has the answer as well. It is a gut feeling, and
Right.
guts belong either to me or to you or to somebody. So they guts is a very personal thing.
Gut is a very personal,
So
yes.
yeah. So I think yes, this is absolutely true that there are wildly varying estimates, and it totally depends upon what kind of team you've assembled.
Hmm.
I remember that was sometime last year I was consulting a company who um, tried to do everything by the book. Okay, so they had hired a whole bunch of people. That we have these classic positions, you could say, in any project. They had a manager. They had a database developer. He's just doing the database. He had a guy doing just the UIs, guy doing all, and then 3 developers and a couple of QAs and the whole shebang. Okay, so there's like a
Hmm.
10-person team. And thing was that when they called me in already, they've already signed up something and they already were partly underway, but now they wanted some consulting. I realized that there was this one guy in that whole bunch, okay, who was actually a freelance software developer from Delhi. I remember he was from Delhi. He was so smart. Okay, he was so smart. I wanted to tell the CEO that you actually get rid of this rest of the team, and this guy is going to do it in half the time. I'm
Hmm.
reversing this guy's example. Okay,
Right.
I'm not saying that. So they had estimated like 4 months, and I said if you give it to him alone, and here is the whole irony. Okay, give it to him alone,
Hmm.
he'll probably deliver in 2 months. Give it to this rest of this team, give it to this 10-man team, and you won't get it done in 6 months. So that therein lies even
Awesome.
more ironical thing. So
Right.
there is that as well, because I know they were going to trip over each other's feet. Okay, that's the gut feeling I was getting, that the project was actually fairly straightforward, simple. They had overcomplicated it by staffing it in all kinds of ways, and dividing responsibilities where it's not required, and so on. So that was my gut feel of the whole thing. And
Hmm.
also got the gut feel that one guy in there was so smart that he was actually feeling disgusted about the whole thing. Okay, he was a freelancer. He's getting paid by the hour, so he just kept quiet. He never said anything. But I knew that he's actually laughing. Okay, at how much money these guys are going to waste. Probably he's wondering. Okay, they keep me around for 8 months. It's good for me. I mean, I'm going to get paid for 8 months. Okay. So it's something like that. So yes, wildly varying estimates depending on the people you have. So everything is depending on the people you have. Thoroughly
Yeah.
agree.
Right. So I love that you actually talk about the next comic strip out here. And this is exactly what it is, right? The opportunist developer, right? He's just looking at banking on milking some guy, right? So the guy says, I sent the brief to 4 developers to get a rough estimate of the development time. I got answers ranging from 5 hours to 3 months. Look at the range, right? Look at the range. It doesn't make sense. Even worse of all, the estimates were justified and seemed realistic. So everybody told him. So now we are actually saying that they also told him what it would entail to kind of achieve that in that kind of time frame. So he's like, just like how estimations can be crazy. What can we do? Now, obviously, he's looking at what should he commit to the client, and he says, "Easy. You build the customer for 3 months and have the devs do in 5 hours." So this is precisely that. So I think, yeah, there are going to be opportunist people everywhere. I think if somebody says, "Okay, this can be done sooner," let him do it, but still charge probably separately. And I think this obviously crosses the line of ethics and practices that we do or
Yeah.
undertake with customers.
This
I
kind of stuff actually doesn't fly. Okay, sorry, I
Yeah,
butted in because this kind of stuff, okay, remember your bosses, okay, sometimes so your customer sometimes is from your own organization, your own bosses, or sometimes the customer obviously is the outside paying customer. Either ways, they're there for a reason. Okay, so here is this the stark reality. They were like you and I a couple of years back. They know exactly what's going on. Most of the times they have very good idea about what kind of figures you're going to come up with. So if you throw bullshit like that, okay, you're probably going to
yeah,
end up losing the project if it's from the outside, or if it's your boss.
true,
If it's your boss, he's laughing at the back of your mind. He's laughing. He knows what you're doing, and it
right,
really doesn't help. So
correct.
if you want one little small, if I may dare to add one little piece of wisdom, is that no one, including the senior most or the junior most, should ever bullshit about their estimate.
True.
It may be wrong. It's okay. It may be wrong, but
Hmm.
that one strategy never works. Okay. So you got two cases here. Whatever you say, if you feel from your heart, okay, that this is my estimate, this is what I thought is the estimate. You may be right, you may be wrong. Okay. And there are some consequences to that. If you're right, actually, maybe they congratulate you and so on. If you're
Hmm.
wrong, man, maybe you have a couple of like tough meetings and you renegotiate, maybe.
Hmm.
But if you bullshit, okay, so if you've thrown something that you know is what I'm saying is like this willful lying, okay, I'm saying that I
Right.
knew I wanted to say 10, but I went and said 50 or 30 or whatever. That always gets caught. And that doesn't reflect well because that meeting doesn't is not like the average meeting of a wrong estimation. That
Correct.
is manipulative. That is
Yes.
manipulative. And somehow, call it whatever, somehow the bosses come to know. That's why
Hmm.
they are the bosses.
Right.
That is exactly why they're bosses. So they know, yeah, I mean, it's genuine advice. They know when you had an estimate and it may not be right or it needs to be corrected. That's fine. But they know when you actually had told the wrong estimate on purpose.
Right.
That's not good. So my one advice to
Awesome.
everybody, just yeah, just
Awesome.
be honest. That's okay. You
Yeah,
may go
yeah.
wrong, but
That that's
don't
a
ever try to manipulate. Yeah, yeah.
that is actually a gem, Ashwin. No, I completely agree with you. That's an absolute gem what you said. All right. Let's move a little bit towards the execution part. Okay. So um, I'm just going to read this out. So the guy says in the meeting, it looks like a conference room. He says that let's spend the next few 4 hours reviewing the project plan. Okay. The guy, so he continues saying, I've detailed every resource, task, and dependency into an exquisitely accurate roadmap. It took me 2 weeks, but it's the only way to make sure we are not wasting time. Okay. So he spent 2 weeks and now he wants 4 hours of the entire team to kind of review that. The lady here says, my tasks are just 2 weeks late because I was waiting for your input. So he was completely oblivious to the fact that somebody was waiting on him. Dilbert says, okay, and you left off one task. So all dependencies are wrong. Okay, so and I'm changing all of my estimates to be determined. Okay, this is a legit status. And Dilbert says, "Can we do that? I didn't know I had an option to say can to be determined, and I have been using random numbers." The project manager or some the guy says, "I'll have to redo the whole plan." Immediately the last guy says, "Don't worry, we won't do anything until we hear from you."
Until
There is so this whole strip was like I don't know, it's a Bible in itself because there are like chapters which can be written out of every slide on this strip, right? So it's just like how people put numbers out there, how people plan. And I go back to my original point saying that if you have little bit, even if you have little sufficient bit, just start doing things, start building things. Once you start building, you know how much value you have earned. So we go back to the whole question about output and outcomes and start measuring the earned value. At least when you have a metric around how much is done and how much is remaining, estimates will get better. Then you can tailor, of course, to see how well you are doing, what can be improved, etc. And the basic agile principles can also be put to place. But the fact of the matter stays that if your budget is fixed, in most of the cases, it's going to be engineered backwards so that I know whether I have to throw more engineers at it so that more quantum can be achieved. But without clarity on what has to be done and without a metric of whether we are doing well or not, the progress indicator has to be very, very clear. And once you do that, I believe the numbers don't become random anymore. They're actually quite calculated and we can get there in good amount of time. But Ashwin, tell me something. How are you a deep fan? I mean, how big a fan are you of work breakdown?
I am a fan. It of course it makes sense to break it down to a you could say finiteness, which is not too much. Okay, so don't go too far, fine graining the whole thing. You should know the broad chunks at least, before and most of the estimates, if you see the whole talk that we are having, Ameya, is
Right.
about those estimates, okay, which are expected early. Okay, so they're expected early on in the meeting, maybe the first week itself that we first time met and talked. They want some ballparks. That is when the whole the friction occurs, and you got to come up with some figure and you got to say something, and you're struggling as to how much do I know. Okay, so there are the later on the estimates can improve, but it's the early stage that is very critical because you don't know whether you're going to say 3 months or 3 years. So but see in this trip, okay, it's like what I read out of this is one thing that I want to say is that the person who does the estimates is doing any kind of planning. He has to huddle together with the entire team quite frequently. Okay, the
True.
first joke is right up there that he's kept them in the dark for such a long time that they have no idea what he is up to. Firstly,
Right.
that is a wrong way of doing any estimates. Please just gather your folks together, talk to them on a daily basis that this is happening. I'm thinking this will take such and such and so and so and so and so. At least they heard you, man. At least they heard what's going on and they're aware. Okay. The second thing I've learned is to look for, so these chunks, when you break them down, look for um, those tasks. Like I think I said once before in this talk, look for the toughest tasks. Okay, it's like a
Right.
80-20. I think we use that rule. So, and I think you would agree with me that it's only the 20% of any project that takes
Yep.
80% of the time.
Yep.
So because that's the tough one. If you knock that off, okay, if you identify them correctly, because all we are doing right now is identifying, not coding them out. We're just identifying them. So if you identify them correctly in the beginning, okay, that this is the pain point, okay, guys, this and this is the pain, you probably going to come very close to a good estimate, I would say. Okay, so do that first. That's the joke there. I see is he left off just one task, okay, somewhere, and then this entire thing is
Yeah.
gone because they've not identified how critical a task that is. It might be a
Correct.
couple of days, maybe 3 days, looks like, and it may be months long. Okay, it needs to be discussed because it's hiding in there. One guy
Correct.
once, like the same example I used before, we did, by the way, we did end up making that WhatsApp clone.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And
Okay.
yes, we did. And since it is falls under the broad category of social media, like this chat social media, we had no idea. And here is my learning. We had no idea that Google and Apple now has some insane rules about protecting users' privacies and this and that. I mean, my
Correct.
point is they had so many policies and so many changes that it ended up chewing off another couple of months. You won't believe this. So, 8, 9. I've done 9 or 10 submissions, each time getting a reject. It was getting comical almost to the point as to, and that's all because of the social angle of things. We never thought that, we
Right.
thought it was all technical. We think it's all
Correct.
technical, it's all engineered, it's working. No, hang on. They're just worried about what content, how do you
Mm.
moderate this, how do you do this? And they have their own rules. But it turns out that this external dependency turned out to be the biggest task, the
Mm.
biggest one actually,
Mm.
even bigger than any one individual. So experience plus possibly identifying some of these hidden bombs. I call them little bombs. They're like landmines actually. Okay, you don't know, you don't see them until you of course step on them.
Right.
So they're hiding in any project. Go through the specs in such a way just to identify these landmines. And of course, the last part is the joke. We joked about
Yeah.
Fibonacci series being used as random numbers.
So no, so you're absolutely right. So I'll tell you what, I think I'm not a big fan of drilling down to every little detail, but I always keep telling my developers that don't think estimations are a way to kind of reach a particular date. Okay, it is estimations in my head serve two purposes. One is, of course, alignment, and second is clarity. Because here also in this case, if you get the whole team together, the whole team is aligned saying, okay, this can be achieved. Whether you are the active programmer on that task or not does not matter, but if the whole team commits to that estimate, it gives immense alignment saying that, yes, we agree that this particular goal can be achieved in X amount of hours. The second part, I think, is deep clarity. So I always tell my developers that break it down. I don't want like minor details. They start giving me tasks like, isko aadha ghanta lagega. This will be done in 1 hour's time.
Yeah, I
I'm like,
agree. I agree.
this is too much.
No,
I'm
yeah.
like, just to think, start off your Visual Studio, restart your computer is going to shave off 5 minutes. Okay, so let's not go too deep down to 30 minutes and 1 hour tasks. I keep telling them that keep it anywhere between 2 to 4 hours. That is also more than enough, because that gives you immense clarity as to it is well thought out. So alignment and clarity, I think in my head, are the outcomes of an estimation exercise, which of course has to be done together as a team, not really in silos, even if the tasks will not be worked upon those developers. Now,
Yeah.
estimation takes time. So, like you rightly said in the beginning of this conversation, also, that if we educate people on telling them what is going to be estimated, how it is going to be done, what factors are going to be the estimates and the numbers based on, I think that's perfect. It had not struck my mind that it's good to gain empathy of the stakeholders right up front. Yeah, awesome. So the next slide, of course, is definitely a large pun. I mean, don't mean that, but okay. So let's talk about this a little bit. So there's this wicked guy, right? He's saying we ask for estimates and then we're going to treat them as deadlines, right? So it goes back to the fact that estimates are not going to be accurate, and maybe you keep refining them through the development cycle, and so you know how far you're going to reach. Now, in a case of a release plan, also when we have set a particular date, we either identify that particular date with a fixed scope, or we know that something needs to go out by that particular date. So we reverse engineer the scope, saying how much can be done in that particular date. I think commitment of the entire team is extremely crucial when it comes to this. And it's absolutely fine to read the team's sentiment and team's morale in achieving those deadlines. What do you think about this? I mean, do people hold up against the dates given?
Yeah. Firstly, we laughed when we saw this slide, but I believe this is the truth. I mean, the world is like this. It is sad. We don't like it, but the world is like this. Okay, so any dates you quote in any big meetings, you're bound to be sort of held liable as
Right.
in legal parlance. So it's just sad now. But here is my deal with, and here is what I tell software, my own guys at least. Okay, that in every profession, okay, there has to be some occupational hazards. Okay, if you join up the army, okay, and start joking about that, I may be hit by a bullet. Now, isn't that something which you would tell him? Look, you did join the army, right? I mean, my point is, yeah, are you really sad about the fact that you may be hit by? Well, you joined the army. Now, if you join the software industry, in our case, having to give estimates and then be held liable for them is a part of an occupational hazard. I, in fact, tell them not to actually fret too much. This is how it is. Don't try to
Right.
fight this. I've stopped fighting with this. Okay. So I don't go back. I don't even blame anyone nowadays. I don't blame anyone for holding me or any other teammate accountable. You said 3 weeks. Okay. What happened? It is the way it is. But at least I've
Right.
had a few, not everybody is convinced because it takes a bit of time for this truth to sink in. But there are a few converts, I would say, to my side. And they've learned to live with it. They come to me, they laugh about it. They say, yeah, you know what, Ashwin, today we got this meeting. I know we told them that the project would be over by now. We got to deliver the sad news that it's going to take another couple of weeks, 3 weeks. We got to face the music. Yes, we have. So, I mean, it's just about once you make it, sort of internalize it, okay, Okay. So don't try to, shirk away. The worst thing you should do is actually, okay, I'll be honest here. The worst thing you should do is trying to dodge this thing, or trying to tell your stakeholders that, you remember, you said these were estimate dates and not real deadlines, and then we go into the semantics of what word was used that time. Was it really a deadline? What was the mood there? What was the weather at that time? Maybe our phone lines were a little weak. I didn't hear you properly. No, no, don't try all of this. Actually,
Correct.
it's pointless. And if you just go in there and deliver the news, okay. So it's this I call as the classic occupational hazard. Live with it,
Yeah.
and be tough. I mean, just be tough. I mean, here we are in this occupation. Okay, not everything is going to be all nice and friendly. You got to face this once a while.
True. True. But okay, so we are towards the end of our conversation, and I know it almost seems like we have mocked the entire exercise of estimation, but trust me, I think
No, we have
um,
not. No, no,
no,
we have
no,
not.
no, we have not. Yeah, I agree on that. Just light-weighted humor, but I kind of wanted to just sum up in a few five laws. Some of the great people have already put out the laws out there, so I'm just quoting them here. Um, so when it comes to estimations being the necessary evil, right? The five laws are right in front of us. Estimations are a waste, which means all the time that you put in getting those estimates, most likely is going to give you a number, but not going to give you any kind of output which can be used. Okay, so these estimates are a waste has to be taken in a very different way. It's not a negative connotation here. It actually means that estimates themselves may not be useful, but unless you build something with it, right? That is the second part of the sentence. Estimates are non-transferable, which means that you had a team, then that team is probably going slower than you anticipated. You give the same task to another team, and they most likely are probably not going to be able to do in the same amount of time. That's for sure. Like we said, gut is very personal, and it is tuned differently. So the numbers are going to be different. Execution is going to be different. Estimations are bound to be wrong. They always come with a certain caveat, and continuous or making that entire process iterative, or the continuous discovery of where we are, what we want to do, has anything changed, has the target moved, has the scope changed. Then revising those estimates probably will give us a better comfort level. I think everybody, like you mentioned, avoid those awkward situations. Just make everyone comfortable, including the stakeholders. It's probably a good idea. Estimations are temporary, of course, because things change. Just in the last slide, we say is that context changes. If the context changes, the weather was different that time when we started off, especially in a quarterly cycle. Things have changed 2 months ago. Things are different now. So yeah, estimations are temporary. What was even priority before may not be priority now, or something else has come. Something else is burning now. Um, at the last, of course, estimations are absolutely necessary. Despite whatever we say, what we know, we always want to know, have a good metric or good feel on how much this is going to take, be it cost, be it effort, be it people, be it resources, infra, whatever it may be. Because ultimately, what cannot be measured definitely cannot be improved. So if there is no metric, and though we say that this is a gut feeling, etc., unless we put some number on it, we don't retrospect, or we don't use that number to tune our gut, we will never be able to improve. And I mentioned that experience, all it happens that you're reducing the buffer, you're making the estimates more accurate. Yeah.
Mm.
Ashwin, that was my conclusion. How would you like to take it next?
These are the absolute truth. There's no doubt about what you summed up here. Okay, I would like to just quickly say a little thing about each one of these points. Estimates are, yeah, I know the effort of estimate itself doesn't get you anything productive. I would say, don't forget, sometimes this helps you win a project or lose it. Okay, so when you are in the small industry, okay, a good estimate might be the difference between winning a business or not. Um, them being non-transferable is obviously because it's a gut feel related. It's a people oriented thing. Okay, after all, we do work with humans. We've not gotten into that much of automation that we've knocked off all the developers. No, we are still quite far from that kind of a world actually. I don't know why there is a lot of rumor mongering about developers' jobs being eliminated and so on. But I think from where we stand, I still need all my people. No machines are replacing them suddenly.
True. Absolutely.
Um, Estimates go wrong, yes, yes, and sometimes yes, they are temporary, they're transient, and they're absolutely necessary. There's no doubt about it. In fact, I would suggest organizations organize, just like we have these formal, agile coaching and blah, 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 and so on. Many times I've seen that there is a lot of training around estimation techniques. Okay. I've seen a
Correct.
lot of that. I've attended a lot of that. There's a lot of techniques they teach, but I would suggest that they also spend time with what is called as an estimation culture. I just coined this word,
Mm.
an estimation culture. Like, what is my culture of estimation in this company?
Mm.
That needs to be really ingrained because that actually is the critical point here. So make sure you talk to your people and give them a good confidence about who you are as a CEO or as a leader of the organization. That, guys, when you estimate, do use your gut. On
Mm.
top of all those estimation tools, is your gut. Okay. The tool might say 3 days, but every which way it is screaming out to you that it's going to take more than a couple of weeks actually. So there is something wrong here. Use your gut. Then how the organization supports that the estimations be as real as you feel, and we will
Mm.
not like shoot you. We saw a couple of cartoons back there, so we are not going to shoot you if they go wrong, but please be truthful in the beginning, or how your culture is about. And this can be told in one way, and of course then be demonstrated when things do occur, so that they watch what happens to others when estimation go wrong and so on. Most of this fear you spoke about earlier stems from them having seen something very horrible when
Right.
somebody else screwed up their estimates. Okay, and that
Mm.
brings the fear into his mind, and he starts over buffering everything, flat out. So that then it becomes a joke. He just closed. His mind is closed. He says,
Right.
"No way. If it's one day, I always say 2 days. Okay, double everything." So, but great summary. Great summary here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashwin, for doing this for us. It was really fun talking to you about this. It's been time. I have been wanting to touch up with you, and this was perfect for that.
Perfect. Perfect.
All
Perfect.
right.
Thank you very much for
Thank you,
having
Ashwin.
having
Thank
me
you
here.
so much.
Thank you
Yes.
very
Bye
much.
bye. Take
Yeah.
care.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye.